Hi, welcome to Forging Men. My name is Redmond and I'll be your host for today. Today's a very exciting moment for the organization I represent called the Character Company. We have the special purpose of welcoming our founder and CEO, and we get to find out a bit more about the story of why this wonderful organization was started. To me, he is a brother, a great mentor. I've had the privilege of traveling our beautiful nation over the last 2 years with him. And I've learned so much, but I'm going to pass this over to him so he can do a quick introduction before we get going.
Hi everyone, my name is Jaco, and yeah, it's weird to sit on this side of the conversation. So, but thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Jaco is a man of many words. I think the one question we would like to set the tone with before we get started is, why the Character Cup? What was the inspiration? What was the need? What was the desire that made you start this wonderful organization where we've got so many men that serve, so many boys that we get to represent and stand in the gap for, and so many moms that have a bit of a voice with our backing?
Yeah, I think for me this comes out of a very raw and I would say broken or painful space in many ways. So I grew up with an absent father, and I was one of, in the categories of absent fathers. I grew up in a space where father is present, but completely emotionally absent, but also absent in his time. I often say, I would wake up in the morning and he wasn't there, and I would go to bed at night and he wasn't there. And so in many ways, I was reminded twice a day that I was not really worth spending the time with. And when you're young, and a lot of this we now know, and it's reinforced that I wasn't the only one out of the whole population that dealt with this, because we're having this conversation so many times with boys and with men that are experiencing the same stuff. When you're that age, like primary school for me is fine. I had no issues. I was, didn't realize that that crucial building block was being removed. It was kind of stolen from me at that stage. And as I grew older in my teenage years, I realized something was missing and I couldn't put my finger on it. And by then, and for me, it was also an environment where I was really exposed to a lot of bullying. And like, it just became very, very messy. And I picked up certain things that I tried to survive with, and certain character traits that I tried to protect myself with. There was a lot of stuff I didn't see. Like I didn't see, relationship play out in front of me. I didn't see how conflict is resolved and managed well. And as I grew older, I carried that stuff with me. And like looking back, it's definitely not a white picket fence story. So it looks a bit like a disaster zone in many ways, for which I'm grateful. I mean, I get to use that experience to shape something different, to avoid it for other boys. But there's a brokenness that I carried in that made this hard. And I came to a point, I was already in the nonprofit space for a while, and even in that, two of the big things for me was probably by far the biggest thing that I found as a challenge was that no one showed me God's heart. And so my relationship with God as a father, it was a very complex one, because my relationship with my earthly father was so complex. And I know that I wanted the approval of my father, and therefore I tried to do everything better. I tried to work harder, and it not happening kind of reinforced that, like, I was just not good enough. Like there was something wrong with me, and therefore it wasn't important. And so that kind of carried over into my relationship with God. And so it was just constant, just working for affirmation, trying to be better, because then I would be recognized. I would have a space in that. Yeah, and so it just came to a point where I'm not just burned out, even in the nonprofit space, and I was done. I'm like, I didn't want anything to do with this any further. I remember I wanted to go to work in Sandton, drive a nice car, see what a paycheck looks like, and if you asked me for help, I was going to be very negative about it. And in so many ways, as God has often just done for me, saved me from myself. And I got to a point where I just had to sit down and go, like, what is this? Why is this so hard? Like there are challenges here that I don't understand and I can't grasp. And the seed was planted, because I realized, looking back at it, that it was that one crucial thing is that the affirmation that I needed as a young boy of the kind of man that I was, and that someone could see in me, was just never there. And so I was searching for that. And so, yeah, Character Company was started. Originally, the idea was just to build something where we can reinforce the strength and the courage that we need. But it was about the character, the development of character, because that's crucial. If we can have strong character, then on that we can build the other things. And also because of my experience in the corporate space, I wanted to have something that was sustainable and had a strong structure. And so, that to me was the company part. And so, yeah, the Character Company was 2013. That was when we started this. And so it came out of that.
Wow, that's amazing. Just remember 2 years ago at one of our camps, we celebrated the 10th year anniversary. Can you believe that it's been that long, right?
No, I tell you, did not see this coming.
And here we are. We've shared a lot of good conversations, and a lot of that has led us back to our past, our upbringings, and the traumatic experiences that we faced from time to time. And I think the joy and the laughter always gives us a bit of hope when we realize the work we do. And I spend a lot of time with the boys, asking them what they want to be and what they want to become when they're older. They are so fixated on the fact that they can only be soccer players, DJs, taxi drivers, or cops. And it makes me think about a moment I shared with you on one of our travels, when you told me you were younger, you just wanted to be rich and have a lot of money so you could be chauffeur driven everywhere. Do you remember that?
Rich and powerful was the goal. Yeah. And I had my benchmark for rich was chauffeur driven rich. Yeah. I grew up in the Free State. There was no limousines in the Free State, so I don't know what I was doing. There was a picture in my head that I stuck to. Yeah, but that was the goal, because for me it was, like, if I had that amount of money, I would have enough power. It wouldn't bother if he was like me. My identity would be fixed in something like that. Wouldn't be bothered by being bullied. So there was a plan. Yeah. Thank goodness there is a plan. And I want to add in here, I was reminded a while back that the stuff that I dreamed of, I got. I am rich and powerful in what is more important.
Amen to that.
The stuff that that's just been, it was a great reminder of that God was still faithful, but he did it in his way. So
rich in eternal blessings, right? So if you're talking about the young man growing up, 13, 14-year-old Jaco from the Free State, could you ever imagine being here where you are right now, having fulfilled this wonderful purpose of helping bring together positive male role models, father figures, to young boys that get the affirmation, the love, the desire, the pat on the back? Like, I'm proud of you, young man, that you didn't get. Has that somehow led to fulfilling your hurts and your traumas? Has that patched you up in a way?
If I think back of it, if I look back at the 13-year-old Jaco, I think one of my biggest dreams would have been if perhaps the 53-year-old version would walk in next to him and go, like, what lies ahead is rough. It's not going to be pretty, but you're not going to have to do this alone. I think for me that would have been the pivotal change in so many things, because I think like all of us, like young people especially, the ones we have the privilege of stepping into that journey beside them, is life is going to come at you. And if you have a strong foundation in faith, you better know that it's going to get rough out there, and that's a given. But what we don't understand is that doing that alone is devastating. It is what drives our addictions. It's what drives the suicide rates. It's what drives just so much brokenness and hurt. So much of our abilities, our dreams, our passions, our callings get stolen along the way because we are just trying to survive. We are just trying to figure out who is, what the whys and the how I'm going to survive this. And I think, I had no idea at that stage. And I wouldn't, and this is a weird thing to say because it's been rough, but I wouldn't go back and change it. So I wouldn't send myself back to go and change the trajectory of that boy's life. But man, I would have walked next to him. That would have made a substantial difference.
We all fall victim to that from time to time, wanting to know the beginning from the end, right?
Well, thank goodness I didn't know I would be running in the opposite direction.
How would we alter God's plans, right? If we were to know the glory, the purpose, the
Yeah.
beauty that would come from his plan being fulfilled.
And a lot of the distraction and hurt along the way was because so often we're like, no, let me try this. I think maybe I can do this better.
Yeah, if only we put our prideful desires aside. We're having some great conversations already. We were speaking about young boys needing to stand for something, otherwise they will fall for everything, right? And that started with a purpose-driven, intentional lifestyle. So in our organization, we've got something called values. Other people call it the MO, other people call it the identity statement. We've got values. How was that sparked? And what led us to finding these 5 wonderful values that we have? I want to share them, which is self-discipline, kindness, honesty, respect, and courage. And the beauty of that is I've stepped into this organization as a mentor, and now I have the privilege of running it alongside you. And those values have become my lifestyle. Everyone in the household, from my 5-year-old to my 23-year-old wife, all share our values. My beautiful wife, 23 years old. So all of us share these wonderful values. Where did that come from?
I think one of the great things is looking back at some of the stuff, well, most of the stuff that we've established at the character company, I would say all the good things, came out of just processes that God just orchestrated in the most amazing ways. And a lot of it, a lot of the things we do also came out of the things I would have wanted to do with my dad. If I look at when we started camping and I look at the activities we do, it was the stuff I would have wanted. that would have just been cool to do this with my dad. And so it's a constant drive to recreate that. And I want to come back to that because there's a great story around that, about how there's no need for it at some point in a boy's life because we do it. But I remember we were just starting this, and we realized that there's some foundational stuff that we needed. So in the early days, there was this bucket list of things like, part of that was a curriculum, and I always use the word curriculum loosely because it's a mentor's manual. It's short, concise processes of how men can raise boys to be good men, and we're all boys, and so we don't have long lists of reading. A rite of passage program. We've just wrapped up one of those. I don't even know how many of one. That was an important part because again, that transition of like when you ask a boy when did you become a man, and like I can't answer that. I think often so I'm still searching for that. And there needed to be a space for boys to go, we are now inviting you to a different journey. And the other one was we needed a strong roadmap. So what does it look like if I'm here and I can get to understand where I am, and I can get to understand how broken this is, and it's not who I want to be ultimately, but I want to become this. This is the man I want to be. We talked to the boys about if you get to sit and have coffee with a 10-year-old version of yourself, what would that look like? I want to get there. How do I get there? It's hard to explain these days because these days you've got Waze and Google Maps and stuff like that. I grew up in a stage we still had maps that you had to stick together because, for one street to the next, it's not on the next page necessarily, but it became a value system. And so we went when we started looking at this, and we started just having a random conversation with the people. And I remember we were introduced to an organization that did some strategic work for corporates and a bunch of young people. And they said, listen, we want to help you with this. And I was like, that stage was just like deer in the headlights, look about everything. It's like, this is an amazing journey, but it's chaos. I'm like, how do we do this? And I remember being invited to a brainstorming session one night in Ravonia, actually, with this group of young, dynamic people, and just walking there. And they were everyone walked in there with a Bible, and we were in this corporate space, and it was a big company, well, and they were doing well. And these young people were just there, and we started talking about this. And they just walked us through what I now understood to be, a proper strat session around, asking the questions and doing this stuff. And we actually just walked out there that evening. It was phenomenal, just with 7 strong values that we wanted to work with. And then we went back and we said, as we sat around as a board, that we want to bring it down to 5. And I'm not sure why it actually ended up being 5, and then maybe so I can remember them because I can count them on one hand. And then it became also the 5 boys in a group, and everything became very much linked around 5. But I remember just walking out there this evening, just thinking, fuck, God is just at work here. There's a plan here. And it was a dream, and it was something I thought would be great. Just out of conversations I've had in the last 2 days with boys that have been through this program over the last 13 years, I am blown away at the strength of the foundation of the values. I've seen it with 5-year-olds. They're keen to grasp, to grab it on, grasp it, and there's a competition about who's going to know it, and then you're thinking, well, it's fun. There's just fun, and we keep on reinforcing it. Having conversations with boys that are now young men and becoming mentors, and in every conversation, the values come out as something that have been that correction, and just like kind of losing the plot a little bit and come back to that. So, yeah, I mean, what a blessing to just be led by God in that space. These are biblical values for us, and they can be applied in any space across the globe, and it doesn't matter what you believe in. These are strong values, but for us, it was one of those foundational things that came out of a war against space that was a seed planted by God. So
it's been a phenomenal tool, I must say. We've seen the fruit of it this past weekend, and even over the last few days, we've seen literally eyewitness testimony over and over again about boys that were on the firing line, boys that were on the verge of making the wrong decision. It could alter the course of their life. They could go down a path of gender-based violence, corruption, suicide, racism, whatever they choose. But it was one specific value of courage, self-discipline, kindness, honesty, respect. One of those values were what they used at the time of need, saying that my values say this about me. My identity is not the latter. My identity is this. And God calls me that, and I will make a choice to. And it's been phenomenal.
And what was nice about that process is we brought the 5 values to the table, but boys brought the descriptions. And so, honestly, show love with a good heart. Our boys did that. So we then took that, and we had conversations around that with our boys at that stage. And so all the descriptions that came out of this was theirs. So
that's a beautiful thing to hear. Most of the times when we put the mentors in front of the camera and we ask them about their values and stuff, most of them allude to the fact that they wanted to cross an amber robot, but they were with their boys and they realized they're not going to break that rule, that value, or they wanted to answer the phone and they're not going to because the little boys are watching them. And I can tell you, the level of accountability we have seen in this organization from as little as our ones are, it's the 5 to 8 year olds. Remember your girl comments, and you can, but then you'll understand why the wild eat. They're young. They are beautiful, but terrible bunch. We love them with our whole hearts. They are the ones that I've seen. I can honestly say this with all our heart. And the level of accountability that I've seen through TCC boys that we have mentored is far greater than some of the men I've partnered with or walked with. In the last few years. And I think those two, when it comes to accountability, I think one of the statements that ring true to you is accountability, that you speak of very, very often. And the second is masculinity. And I want to get into those two quickly. But before that, so we always see this example of where businesses go in, and they always forecast this wonderful telescope. One of these old school ones that they pull up and look at the horizon, and we are here. What's our 5-year, 10-year vision? But we go back to 2010, right? World Cup era, vuvuzelas, chaos. Everyone's losing their mind, and you decide, I'm going to go give some boys what my father never gave me. You started at a table in Randburg with 3 little beautiful boys, and you've literally altered the course of their life. Those 3 boys that you started with one of them are in matric, the others are in grade 11, and they are young men. They've been on our Rites of Passage program. And they have the privilege of leading the next generation of youth as junior mentors in the upcoming months. So that was where you started. 10 years later, we celebrate the 10th anniversary. We're now 12 years, going on 13, into the program. What do you think the future of this program looks like? Considering we went from 3 boys to 400 plus. We went from 1 man, a van, full solution. The curriculum was on my heart. I had everything I needed in my car, to 89 wonderful fat men, faithful, available, and teachable men that we have in 6 out of the 9 provinces. What do you think the future looks like?
It's a hard thing to answer, because when I started this, I did not see this coming. I mean, there was just no way. I think I knew after the first session that this can't just be 3 boys. But I also knew that I have a capacity issue, and so I can only do that much. But I did not realize that maybe, as big as the dream was, there was still a faith issue around, like, wow, this can't be. I think for me, over the years, what has been really become very important, and I get to see that right now, and it is phenomenally, brilliantly difficult. All it's saying is, I've always wanted this to be a sustainable organization, and that has been hard. So I've been intentional about that. So intentional is a word I love, and I'm trying to live it where I can. And I stumble over it more than I get to pick it up and carry it nicely. But I wanted it to be an organization that is not ultimately linked to me. And that's hard, because this came out of a very raw place. This came out of deep hurt. And so it was grown out of that. I had the privilege of just see God at work in my life through that. And I often say, I think anyone that just gets benefit from this is a bonus. I mean, all of this is, I often think it's just God has just done this so that I can be shaped and molded. But I wanted to make sure that we can't start this work and it will stop when I run out of energy. Because we talk about mentorship and we talk about the long-term process, because that was from the beginning. We understood that it was going to have to be intentional. It's going to have to be with boys. It's going to have to be long-term, in small groups. I think those were the basic stuff we understood. And so for me right now, my dream is that this is a sustainable organization, that it's not just me, and I've seen that happen. And I've seen that happen in our journey together. And that's great. I mean, that's wonderful. But it's also hard, because there's so much of me invested in this, and because so much of me is invested in this, it's hard to untangle some of that. But I've also been very specific that I would not want to get stuck in stuff like founder syndrome and, whenever I've been able to let go of this, as hard as it was, I've seen it grow, and I've seen it grow. And so I remember standing at our campsite 2 years ago at a camp, and I was standing at the obstacle course down there, and I just saw everything happening around me. And I looked at this, and I thought to myself, like, I had nothing to do to get the stuff here. I dreamt it, and that's great. That's brilliant. But at the same time, it's very hard, because at that same camp, there were boys that got on that camp that had no clue who I was. Mm-hmm. I met mentors who did not know who I was. And it was, I remember saying to God that morning, I was sitting with my cup of coffee and the sun just coming up. I just love that space. And I was just grateful and thankful. And I just said to God, like, this is, like, I've asked for this, and like, these are answers to prayers. But it's a little bit hard sometimes. As it was hard the first time I saw a photo of boys, and I'm like, who are these boys? Because I did not mentor them. It was not boys that I mentored and handed over to another mentor. And if that was the process, then we would not have been able to grow anything. So for me right now, it really is to see this grow into a space. We need thousands of mentors. I would 4 out of 5 boys do not have a positive male role model. Mentorship is not for everyone. There's just not enough men that have the capacity to make this level of commitment. And so I've also been very cautious, and we've also had these conversations. We are living in a society where everything is numbers driven. It's like, how do we perform? And performance is linked to numbers. And this is the one place where I want to go, don't go there, because that's driven by us. And so let God do this. And again, I mean, I more than often have to step back to this, remember this, rather than standing back and seeing it happen. This is not about the numbers. This is about the impact. And when I'm struggling with that, I'm reminded when I have conversations with our boys and realize that, like, man, if all of this was for just some of the conversations I've had over the last week with our young men, then the numbers makes no difference. Obviously, there's a massive need out there, but this is a journey that we're on. It belongs to God. This is not our work, and I want to be part of the adventure. I don't want to steer the boat, but I want to be part of the adventure.
It's amazing. Yeah. We have to mix the business with the vision and mission. I want to go back to what you mentioned, let God do this, right? Because we are faith-based, driven organization. We aren't a ministry. We don't subscribe to one specific church. We are part of the body. And with regards to your specific prayer, right? Not knowing that God is so big, powerful, and mighty that He could do all of this. There are some prayers that we pray that will never get answered, but we still have to plant that seed and have that faith to believe that whether that dream, plan, idol, whatever we pursue comes to fruition or not, God is still God and He's still real, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult. And I can imagine the joy that comes from being able to pray a tangible prayer to a God that you know is real, you want to believe, but when things are up, praise will all go to Him. When things are down, it's like, I'll see what's the flavor of the month. And what a beautiful thing to be able to pray your prayer, live out your healing of your prayer being answered, and to see the fruit of that. But I can think of many unanswered prayers over and over again.
I must say, just to close that off, is, you know, the distance between my head and my heart is very, very, it's light years. It's not just this. And so it's true. It's like, I know the stuff, I you know, it's there. But there are days where it's hard to feel it. I'm a much better consultant for God than I am, you know, like a let go of the steering wheel kind of guy. So I've had to learn the hard way. But this, thanks for reminding me of that. This is one of those. It is. It is difficult to let go because so much of me is invested in that. But it's the most beautiful thing to see.
Awesome. And let go and let God do what He does. Right?
That's the.
So if we get down to the nitty gritty stuff, the accountability and masculinity, right? Forging men, right? A safe space for us to have an open, honest conversation, dialogue of what we believe societal views are on masculinity, on what we believe the lens of what South Africa looks at and what masculinity is. There's all these different dynamics, all these other players. South Africa adopting a lot of Western ideologies with regards to what a man is, what a woman is, all of these things. And we are at the forefront of what we believe masculinity is. It's a space we speak about dearly. Our views aren't always the brightest or the most welcoming, but we've got a lot of players in the game. We've got men that have stepped up to help us follow our tagline of choice, which is raising boys to be good men. So what do you think the current state of masculinity is in our nation, knowing that you've seen men that have stepped up to bat? We've got a lot of cultural norms or dynamics where men of specific colors will not want to raise another boy. We've got a lot of men that want to step up to bat, and they are men of color, but they don't want to because they don't know how to speak, because they were never affirmed, they were never loved. And all of these are little pieces to a puzzle that kind of convolute a man's thoughts of what masculinity is.
So I have the privilege of being able to see both sides of the coin. Just looking at our country and what masculinity is in our country, but actually just, I mean, globally, we are in so much trouble. We live in such denial. I mean, like I mean, there's such confusion around masculinity. And we are trying to fix that by just being more of ourselves and try and make ourselves bigger. And we're just messing it up, you know, terribly. We are broken. We are hurting inside. We are hurting people outside us, or outside of the spaces we operate in. So and I've lived it myself, and I get to operate in spaces. There's stuff about the world of our children that I wish I didn't know. There's things going on, and because we spend so much time in the world of children, I realize that we are just in denial. So it's broken. It's really, I mean, it's seen in all the information that we can gather. I mean, it's seen in the complete lack of accountability, the way that men behave, the way they try and justify and come up with excuses and hide behind, you know, all kinds of excuses, rather than just going, man, I messed up there. I would have so much respect for our leaders and for our people in the public eye if they can just for once go, you know what, I really messed up here and I'm sorry. And so I need to be accountable. I don't want to be like that. But we just don't see it. And so there's just so much of that going on. And what we don't recognize in this is that we have a generation that are looking at us and going, That's what I can get away with. And so that's the role, because that's just easy. So that I think it's, I don't think we quite grasp the world we are creating and the world we have created for our children. It's a very dangerous one. In our absence and in our behavior, we've set an example that young people want to follow that is destroying the generation that comes, behind them. So, I mean, we could probably talk for a day on how terrible it is. So it is bad. It really is bad. And it's bad because we see it around us. You can open anything and it's there, but it's also bad because we have conversations with boys that are hurting so badly, that are just crying out for, so almost like that, where are the good men? But then I get to flip the coin, and then there's the hope, because I have the privilege to spend time and be on battlefields and, in warfare with men that are doing this, that are unfortunately not the norm, and they're the exception. But man, they are, like, if I have to look at how you fix this, I could give you, give me the number of how many men to have right now, and that's how we fix this. That's as simple as that. It is when good men show up, boys grow up well. So when good men show up and they're accountable and they are reaching out to one another, and they saying, like, we don't know how we're going to do this, but we can and we must. Like, we've got these young people looking at us, so let's fix this. And then I get to see the young men that are looking at us, and I see the difference in them. I'm looking at boys that have started with us, those very first boys in the group, but to have a conversation with them again and look at them going like, oh my goodness, this is the answer. We're hoping for it and be like, no, but this is working, man. And then you're having a conversation, you go like, wow, it's working better than I could imagine, because God's in control of this. And we have taken our hands off this. And I've often said that, when I'm standing in front of a group of boys and I want to manage this, man, it's going to be a disaster. Like, everyone should run. But when I can stand there and I'm just going like, God, I've got nothing. And like, just, you can use me, but I don't know. It's in those moments that we get to see it. So, man, it's like, if we just can understand that by just letting go of this ego and pride and arrogance that we walk around with, and just look at what is important, if we can look at the relationship and start working at that. And if society can just see more of what we see when we're at camp, or we've seen boys that are really struggling and drawing on values and picking up phones and calling them on mentors out there and just saying, like, help. Because what we don't get is how broken it is out there. Yeah. We don't get how much boys are hurting. A boy behaving in a very specific way because of what we've created. Boys throw a lot of stuff out there because they expect us not to stick around. Boys throw stuff out there because they want us to prove them right, when they go like, I'm not with it, so I've seen it, so let me show you. Let me get to your no as quickly as possible. When we do intake, like, let's get to that no. Let's not waste time. Like, we want to get to that no now. So let's get to that. So let's not waste my time here. But then there's this little voice inside that boy that goes, if only you don't, like, I'm begging you, I'm going to throw the stuff out there, but please don't walk away. And like, when you stick around and you see that change, man, I mean, like, that is just, that is just seeing stuff that it just blows your mind. And unfortunately, men just don't stick around there.
They don't. It's difficult, eh? And unfortunately, we've had some wonderful stories. We've also had the unfortunate circumstances where we've had wonderful boys that have the privilege of being placed with a wonderful, positive male role model. And he becomes the pillar of hope, the strength. And then it's not always men are slack, or men are toxic, or men are this. And with regards to the stats, before I get into that statement, is 100 men show interest in our program through our PR publications, our media, our video, whatever it is. 10 men sign up in application phase. Only 2 men convert. And the statistics are scary. They are they are really scary. And I think a big component to that is a lot of guys like the idea of doing good, but they don't know what the experience evokes in them of doing good. Because you might step into a place of vulnerability, accountability, commitment, your term that you use, and that stirs up a whole wave of emotions in your heart. in your young 13-year-old Jaco on a rugby field, not knowing how to play rugby. You know what I mean? Maybe he has to do something different because his father never showed him this. And all of a sudden, this mentor that had a keen interest and a heart because he heard this wonderful story of a radio station said, I'm going to be the man that this boy needs. And he steps in and he realizes, wow, I don't know what I've stepped into. This boy has been abused, molested, thrown away, cast out to the crows. And I don't think I'm the man. But we've had this discovery recently where we've actually shared that if a guy's going to leave and maturely tell us, I didn't know what I was expecting, this has rattled me, this has opened me up, we're willing to walk the journey with that guy and excavate those caveats of his heart to look into the young man that needed the affirmation, the love. And we've had the joy of also some of those wonderful stories. We've also had the opposite of men just not being able to deal with the emotional trauma of a young boy's hurt and just turning and running and never looking back.
Yeah.
This thing of men don't cry, cowboys don't cry, is something that has really impacted us as men, right?
It has. And I think luckily I'm in good company there because I think we understand the vulnerability and the emotions around this because we've also been intentional about this. There's certain things I want to be for all the things I'm struggling with and all the things that I struggle with in the way that I deal with things. I don't want to be a coward, and I want to be teachable. I want to learn, and I want to be there. And when we tell boys that you should not show emotions, we are raising cowards. And we see that. And I think, you can talk to any of the mentors in my program, the ones that have been here for years. Everyone has gone through the same process. This sounds great. I want to do something. There's a stirring in my heart. God is stirring something in me, and I'm running into this. And it's like jumping into a pool of cold water in the winter. It's like your breath gets taken away by the immense, the enormity of this. And the biggest part of it is I'm immediately confronted with all the stuff that I've never dealt with. And I am finding myself in spaces where I'm being held accountable. And I'm finding myself in a space where like everyone's around me, like people are involved in my life. And it's that space where no one cares what I do. No one cares what car I pitch up with. People just want to, like other guys just want to give me hugs and look after my heart. And I've always wanted that, but I don't know what to do with this. Like I'm behaving like that boy that I'm struggling with because I don't know how to regulate this. And unfortunately, often, and we've structured so many things and built so many things in place to try and get to that before that mentor get to boys, because we understand we don't want to reinforce that. And unfortunately, we don't always have control over that. But the one thing that we did with that is to create an organization where there is a lot of mentors that constantly interact with boys. So boys would be in groups would meet together, and boys will come to camp. And so there's a consistent thread through the process that boys would know, like, okay, I've lost a mentor and that's hard. And sometimes I'm like, that's just life. And we've had mentors that relocate. We have mentors that are living overseas that are still mentoring the boys.
That's also,
we have that.
Teams, whatever means necessary.
We've mentored through COVID, stuff like that. Like if you want to test your resolve, mentor 5-year-olds via Zoom. Oh, yeah, that's a whole nother podcast series.
Yeah.
So,
we'll get into the podcast.
But it's a rough space. And so we've created a space where we're saying to boys, like, things are going to change. And that's good. We can't give you something that's not tangible. And what's tangible is things are going to change. You're going to have changes. Life is going to throw curveballs at you. And one of those curveballs might be that someone that's been a stability in your life might move away or move out of the space. But there will always be this constant. And so I think what the Character Company represents in that is I can always come walking back through the doors into the big hall, and there's going to be mentors there. And I think that's the only way that we'll be able to counter that.
I think the key component there is walking into a hall where they're going to be mentors. These aren't just mentors; they are brothers. Yeah, they are men that care and love deeply and immensely. Yeah, they are accountability partners. Where men that aren't in your circle or space of influence are the men that sit on the couch. They're typical American sitcom dad. Al Bundy. Yeah. Have a beer every day. Wife does this. Wife does that.
Yeah.
Men need a purpose. Men need to be driven. Yeah. And all men crave that deep and intimate conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen it time and time again.
Look at Men Are on Fire. It's like Like you get men there, and men are starting to share their lives within an hour of
Just meeting each other.
We meet people for an hour in the middle of the winter, 2 o'clock in the morning. People are still pouring out stuff they've never shared before. What is important in there is also to recognize, just in these men, boys don't do what you tell them to do. Boys do what they see. And so we've got the values, and we talk about the values, and we talk about the curriculum, and we all of this stuff to boys that, as attention span that we have, which is like 1 minute, 14 seconds. It is not a part of
We do quite well today.
Oh, that's true. Yes. But I've seen this, and I've spoken about this often. Is boys hear this, and we talk about the values, and then they walk into a space and they look at me and they go, like, I want that. Here are men from all walks of life. Here are men that often when in other spaces cannot sit around the same table, that have got one goal, and their goal is to walk a road with me. And I see them being vulnerable. I see them being accountable. I see them living values. I see them calling each other out when it's necessary. Like that example that is set there is nothing else that can create that. Men that are searching God's heart in a way to look after mine better.
What a saving grace, right? And if we go back to the start of this, all started with one simple prayer, right? The belief in the power of a wonderful, benevolent God that hears us.
Yeah.
If I think about masculinity, and I throw this back to our boys, they have all the views, right? Wokeism, Western culture, what they see, their famous rappers, football players doing, earning salaries that I wanted to say we could only dream of when we wanted to be rich and chauffeur driven. Now we are driven by purpose of loving God, right?
Yeah.
We always share that. Moms, grannies, aunties, caregivers, social workers, teachers, the majority of these institutes and places that these kids are placed are 95% female or lady driven. There's a lot of things that these women can do, but they can never teach a young boy to be a
man.
Never. They can never. So our organization exists for a reason. And I think the saving grace we have there is with these boys faced with all these social media influencers and lifestyles, we all fall victim to it at times. As grown men that are established and we understand what God has called us into, sometimes we fall victim to the scroll, to watching endless amounts of YouTube. But we've got to center ourselves. And I think the beauty around our values rings true. So my prayer and my heart goes out to the young boys that don't have a positive role model, that don't have a mentor that they can speak to, that don't have values that they could fall back on. Because when they have their back against a rope, the enemy's there to clinch them and pull them right through. Whereas our boys have the values, and they might be letting into a place of temptation, but they've always got that saving grace that comes through values.
So, I mean, how many times have we heard that? Boys that just go, like, yes, I'm going to have to come in. Like last year was rough. I get involved in the wrong things. I really stumbled, but, the is followed. But, my values, I remember the values, and that carried me through. And I think that the problem with that is that we are letting boys out there believe that they're not worth fighting for, where it's actually our responsibility, where we are showing weakness by not pitching up. And that has to change. We want to see a different society. We have to create one. We want to see boys behaving differently. We need to mentor them differently. And we also talk about that often. We're not an organization that talk, if it's not followed up by action.
Yeah.
There's way too much talk in our world, in our country, about all kinds of stuff, and nothing ever happens. And I've often said to people, like, I can sit here and I can talk about this for an hour because this is matched by 2 hours of action. So we double this up, and every one organization do that. So we have the authority to talk about this. We can call men out and we can tell them about this because we live it and we see it, and because we followed up with action. And we see that in the boys. These boys are showing up in all their brokenness and all their struggles. And they're being real about this because they've got men that are not talking about walking with them, men that are actually just talking with them.
A statement that rings true in our beautiful nation with all our people groups, cultures, and smiles is, it takes a village to raise the boy, right?
Yeah.
We hear that over and over again. I'm sure there's some Chinese proverb that says the same thing, but for us, the reality of that is we live in a place where the NGO space is quite difficult and quite challenged from a funding perspective and all these things. And one thing that we don't do well as a nation are these partnerships, right?
Yes.
What do you think can be done better for us as an organization to kind of break that founder syndrome mindset, the fact that we are parent ministry, the fact that you're going this way, we are going that way. We might serve boys, but not this flavor. It's not these types of boys. What do you think you would say to the NGO space, to specific groups or entities where partnerships can actually help fix this problem?
So I think I want to go back to the takes ability to raise a child comment first, because we use that as a cliche so easily. It rolls off the tongue.
Way
It is so true. I mean, it does take ability to raise a child. The problem is we are not turning around and looking what the village looks like anymore.
Yes.
We have abandoned this. I mean, like you think of this village in this picture of, of everything working together like it's supposed to be. But the reality is, I mean, it looks like it's in the middle of a drought. Tornado's gone through there. It's like it's been London burned. Like, it's like there's like 3 sheep walking around, like, you can see through them almost. I mean, that's what it looks like right now. We've abandoned the concept of this. We are responsible for it. And so we have to take stock. We have to go back and start cleaning this up. I want to believe that 13 years ago, or in 2013, regardless of when you listen to this, if there was another organization doing long-term mentorship for boys from as young as 5, intentionally, I would have partnered with them rather than starting something new. And so over the years, if people have asked me advice on, starting NGOs, my first comment was always just don't do this.
Run.
You have no idea the immense amount of work and resources it requires to run a nonprofit. And so look at an organization in your community that's doing similar work and go and partner. Go and volunteer first, go and check this out and then partner with it. I think, unfortunately, there is so much driven by the self. And that part of it's good because, a lot of the good work comes out of the deep hurt, but a lot of it also comes out of a lot of arrogance and pride. And the resources is not available for 5 organizations to do the same thing in the same community with slight differences and different names and different colorful logos. We are purposeless in that. It creates a lot more harm than it does. We are not. If I talk to the NGO space, one of the things that we often start having conversations around is like, have you actually measured your impact? Are you actually doing good, or you're harming the community? Are you creating a crutch for people in your community? And have you taken stock and go, like, if you're not adding value, then don't do it. And stay in your lane, be focused. And these are sometimes intentional challenges that we create, or intentional errors. But sometimes it's just because we're also driven by, we just want to help everyone. And so you end up, I mean, we've often had to do that, where you kind of have to keep on coming back. It's like, no, we are not doing that. And that's often hard. And that's, again, something you can't do. And so it's, in that space, it's important. I mean, imagine if you come together and you share an office space, you share a printer, and you share a telephone line, and you start sharing an accountant, like, it's all those basic things. We can do so much more together than alone. And it's been, I think, one of my big passions around the nonprofit space has been sustainability and partnerships. And they really go hand in hand. You want to be sustainable right now. I mean, we're looking at a funding landscape that is very challenging. We are looking at resources that is, our society has become more and more inward focused. I don't want to say selfish. Like, it's just about me. I need to survive. No one else matters. We don't see the bigger picture in this. And so if we want to keep on making an impact, if we want to keep on raising the next generation and helping someone, then we also need to start focusing on what we do. We can't develop skill if we don't develop character at the same time. You can't add resources if the resources does not fall on fertile ground. And so it has to start there. We have to start fixing this. And that's the way we do it.
That's wonderful. That's really, really wonderful. Do you think we are components of creating this handout culture in South Africa, whereby you go into a community to do good? Like for us with the Character Company, we often go out and we want to share the journey of what we do by raising boys to be good men. And we don't believe in quick fixes. We believe in long-term partnerships. It's trying to put a plaster over a gunshot wound, the problem that is systemic fatherlessness in South Africa. And we somehow in South Africa have poured gas on that fire and ignited this thing to be something that it's not. I want to ask you a question about, do you think that fundraising old school fundraising has kind of gone out the window, and there's a bigger drive now for funding and giving from a CSI perspective, just to be a line item, a checkbox for BE compliance, or just the company thing.
Yeah, I think some of what you asked there, if I can cover some of it, I think I would love to think that as an organization we are creating better communities. I don't know that we always get it right. I think sometimes we we are keen to do something and we get it wrong. There are sometimes where we want to get into a space and want to help, and we then run into organizations that are working in that area. Unfortunately, still not long-term mentorship from as young as 5 intentional boards. I mean, like we are still the only organization that I know of in the country doing that. Absolutely. But the problem is also from a corporate funding point of view is that has changed. I mean, we no longer we don't have the resource and the time to sit and write proposals with in places where there's no relationship. We're a relationship-driven organization, so we understand that if you don't have a relationship, you're wasting an enormous amount of time if you just try to do a copy-paste approach out there. But there's also a message in there for the corporate sector. Like, we cannot be irresponsible by just saying, well, I have to do this, and therefore let me write a check and just get it over and done with, because there's just that landscape is just too fraught with corruption, and that's unfortunate. I mean, it's just we can't do that. It's irresponsible giving is worse than no giving, and so the whole partnership concept needs to be pulled through into organization. Because imagine an organization going like, you know what? Like in our workforce, the statistics is exactly the same. The fatherlessness and the impact of that in my own workforce. How do I fix it here? I want to partner. I don't want to just write a check. I want to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
I want to strengthen this organization. And how do I do that? And how do we build this together? And we can just do so much more.
People don't look beyond the actual organization that they're helping and look at the long-term impact to them as an organization, the families that they sustain in their organization, knowing that the impact of that could help lead greater men with purpose, nuclear families, remarkable, accountable men that will not turn a blind eye to society's woes that we have. But so much good conversation, and I think there's going to be a lot more time for the masculine accountable things as we move on with this series. I'd like to ask you one question in closing that I think is vitally important. What is one thing you would say to, let's say, the juniors? We've got boys on our program, right? We've got bonsais, juniors, seniors, then alumni. But let's just say the youth of our nation, boys and girls. What is the one thing that you think could provide encouragement, wisdom, hope, purpose? What's the one parting statement?
If there's one piece of advice I can give to any boy out there, is to surround yourself with positive male role models. I mean, it's just this. And like every other conversation that we need to have about what is the decision about this and what's the decision about that comes from the one place where I'm not isolated. Isolation is the most dangerous thing for us as men. And so as a young boy, I need to be very aware of that. If I have that in my life, I really need to embrace it. And I need to understand that I'm part of a small percentage of that. If I'm out on that journey right now and looking like what would be the most important thing to put in place in my life, it would be, who are the guys that I'm going to get to sit around my table? Guys that are those faithful, available, teachable guys with a value system, guys that will hold me that vulnerability, accountability, commitment space. There's nothing more important than that. And I need to be intentional about that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, man. That's such a wonderful, thought-provoking conversation. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Gauteng, South Africa, and the rest of the world, you've heard it here first. You now know why the organization exists, why it was created by a wonderful prayer in guidance of looking for hope. And here we are, mentors across this beautiful country, hundreds of boys. And this work is not just for someone, it's for everyone. So men, we need you. Moms, we need your boys. And all of this comes together to create a beautiful rainbow nation that we speak about so lovely. Till next time.